Tarek and Rush are kicked from Optic. Rest in peace, North America. On the 22nd of August 2017, Optic Gaming finally announced that they have a new Csgo roster. Unfortunately, they only announced 4 of these players, which does make this video a little bit harder to make, but we're going to split this into 2 parts because of that very reason. So, let's start things off with what exactly is the plan. First of all, Optic, taking a look back on their history, they did pretty well back at the E-League Atlanta, winning that title with a group of a few North American players, combined with one Mixwell from Spain. Afterwards, however, once Stanislaw left, the team was never really the same, and after that they have just been struggling to find their stride. Recently, with Cloud9 having poached away Tarek and Rush, that left Optic to consider now a new European alternative. The European players that they have ended up going with are specifically in order: Friberg, Magisk, Mixwell, and finally the 4th is going to be Alu. The 5th is yet unsure, and while they're going to be deciding, they will be playing with Naf, who will be a stand-in and a part of the Optic Gaming lineup until the final player is decided. Alright, so what exactly is the verdict? Well, right now this video is mostly going to be discussing what roles these players are likely to be playing, why they qualified to be in those particular roles, what is their past experience, and just giving you a little bit more history on these Optic players and how exactly they're going to be coming together as a team. Let's start off with what obviously everyone's going to be having on their mind, that is the in-game leader, and that will most likely be Friberg. Now, Friberg as a player is most naturally suited to be the in-game leader because of his absolutely spectacular past in majors in Counter-Strike in general. Famously, he's remembered to be a part of Ninjas in Pyjamas, the same roster that actually went on to be the finalists at 5 different CSGO majors, even winning one of them, the famous ESL 1 Cologne, they were able to walk home with. Something that needs to be noted, however, is that Friberg is not a player who has any past experience in game leading, at least in recent, by recent I mean in any of his histories in the Ninjas in Pyjamas roster. But you have to be considering that a player of Friberg's caliber, who was at the top for so long, who will hopefully come back to the top, or at least close to it, should have some idea on how to lead players and at least how to create a bit of a solid structure going on. And if you look over towards teams like Cloud9, who have had some degree of success in the recent history, especially if you look down towards ESL 1 Cologne 2017, where famously they lost in the finals, they do of course have a very rudimentary style of Counter-Strike where they do just have a bit of a set default, a couple of different ways they can get onto sites, and Friberg, given the pieces that he has to work with, will definitely have the capability. Now, Friberg was indeed the king of Banana on Inferno. However, now it's a little bit more relevant that if you look towards his career path, his trajectory can really be mapped out by Banana. I talked him up quite a bit. He was a major winner. He did make it to 5 finals, but at the end of the day, those 5 finals were really all that he had under his belt. Afterwards, Ninjas in Pyjamas famously fell to a sharp decline. Once that had happened, Friberg was inevitably kicked in 2017, and that's how he wound up in this Optic roster. As far as in the game, Friberg is most likely not going to be playing his entry role that he was famous for playing back in Ninjas in Pyjamas. More likely than not, Friberg will be leaving the entry to the 5th player who has not yet been announced, but is most likely going to be HS from Penta. But it is more likely that Friberg will end up going for something more of a support role. So he's going to be playing the role where he's going to be throwing grenades, he's going to be throwing flashbangs, he's going to be throwing utility and enabling the rest of his players to be the stars. While Friberg was once upon a time considered to be one of the better players in the Swedish scene and one of the better players in the global scene in general, now less so. His skill really isn't up there anymore. His aim is questionable at times, and while he could go off in particular games, you can't really rely on him to be your star power, to be your really big entry fragger, especially when you've got players who are so much more comfortable in doing so. Alright, so we've talked about has-beens a little bit. Friberg's old news. However, a very recent has-been who's also going to be joining Optic is of course Magisk. And now Magisk is a very interesting case because unlike Friberg, Magisk is not a case where a lot of people think that his skills have deteriorated to the point where he can't do what he was doing before. In fact, Magisk in his prime was playing entry positions and secondary entry positions back in North. Even up until the E-League Major, he was doing absolutely spectacularly. In his prime, he was averaging almost 100 average damage per round. That is ridiculous. If you look over towards the E-League Major, which was his last great big performance before Rubinho got displaced by AZ, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But before Rubinho got displaced by AZ, one of his best performances was in fact up against Virtus Pro, where they lost to them in a best of 3. Despite losing them, Magisk did manage to put up one of the highest ever kills scores in a single half, which is to say 37 to be specific. Now, Magisk Boy as a player is someone who's very interesting character, because you've seen that he has the skill to be able to show up, but you've also seen that Magisk as a player needs a lot of space to be able to work around. He needs to be the primary star of the player, so ideally he should be the second entry frag position in this particular Optic lineup, and at the same time he should be given a lot of space by his in-game leader. We already saw what happened when AZ replaced at Rubinho and was given priority by MSL in North, where Magisk Boy really just fell off significantly and wasn't really able to perform anywhere close to where he was expected to be able to do so in his star power position. Now that he is back in a roster where he should be the star player, it will be a little bit more interesting to see whether or not Magisk can reclaim his form, and a lot of the roster's skill and a lot of the roster's success will be revolving around Magisk himself. Will he be able to go back north, or will he fling back south as he did in the past? The final player who we're going to be discussing today in this particular video is someone who's a little bit different from the other ones so far, and that is to say Mixwell, the player who I have accidentally drawn as a bit of a dead starfish. Now, the thing about Mixwell is that it's really hard to actually find stats about him that are really relevant, because he was a primary opper back in Optic, and he did repeatedly say again and again that he doesn't want to op. Although he was one of the best oppers in the world, and there is no contestation about that whatsoever, Mixwell, surprisingly enough, was a player who said, no, I don't want to op, this is not something that I particularly like doing, I want to go back to rifling. The problem that comes in over here is that we don't know what kind of a player Mixwell would be, what kind of position he would really excel on, and we can really only speculate without having statistical data to back that up off of. Now, in particular, he should definitely be the secondary star right after Magisk Boy, as in he should be given the most space after Magisk Boy. That goes without saying. He is spectacularly skilled even with just a rifle, and he will be playing that secondary op position as he has indicated on his stream time and time again. With Alu being able to take up the primary op, that should free Mixwell to do things that he likes to do better. However, we don't really know how good he's going to be with a rifle, so he too is a big question mark in this particular team. Now, how exactly is Mixwell going to be playing in the roster that has been put forward? Now, Mixwell as an opper typically likes wide open spaces. He likes to be able to be the person who's going to be alive later on, who likes to be able to be the person who has the ability to make those mid-round calls, who has the ability to be alive in those clutch round situations. So typically you're going to be expecting Mixwell to be playing a bit more of a passive role, similar to how he plays with an op in taking over control of the more open areas. The most prime example would be Catwalk over on Mirage. Now, the thing about this is that Mixwell has to be allowed to be the player who's either lurking, or he's just the man who waits around a little bit, then he comes into the site as a third person onto the site. He can't be the first two entries, and he also can't be the support player. So Mixwell has to be given a lot of freedom over the map in exactly what he wants to do and exactly how he wants to play it, because this is a player whose game sense, and this is a player whose general in-game skills, his mechanics are so crisp and on point that he can shut down a round on his own as long as he has the freedom to move around and as long as he has the time to do so. So Mixwell most likely is going to end up becoming the secondary star who will either be a lurker or the third man onto the site. Obviously, this might change depending on how exactly he feels like he will be excelling in the rifles, and most of what we can say about Mixwell is honestly purely speculation. Another point to be noted about Mixwell is, of course, that Optic, since February 1st, when Stanislaw left their roster, have not had a proper fifth, and they haven't had a proper in-game leader. So while Mixwell's performances have looked spectacular individually, he hasn't really been able to bring any significant results to the table, and this might be something to consider moving forward, because he will be underneath a new in-game leader, he will be underneath a completely new roster, so it should be interesting to see how exactly he's going to be bringing forward a potentially new Mixwell, a Mixwell in a different role, a Mixwell who isn't opping, and more importantly than anything else, a Mixwell who will be forced to adjust against tier 1 European teams very, very quickly before the main season starts rolling out. Alright, so that's the first three players done for Optic. The last two are more likely than not going to be Alu and HS from Penta. If not HS, there are a few other possibilities that we will be discussing That video will hopefully be uploaded in about 2 days from now, maybe 3, not quite sure, really depends on how fast I am with editing. In the meanwhile, be sure to subscribe over here, there's going to be a link around this time, and if you want to watch a previous video about FaZe and how I think they're going to crumble and fail, then you can click the video over here. Be sure to like the video, comment underneath what you liked about the video, what you didn't like about the video, and what your opinion is on the current Optic roster and exactly how far it'll go. In the meanwhile, this is TeaTime, I'm signing off and I'll see you guys